God is a forgiving group. Okay. So Reverend Mark Gilbert serves as the Global Services Coordinator for our home office of Centers of Spiritual Living, working with Science of Mind communities around the world. He is also a frequent contributor to Science of Mind magazine, is the author of 4 books, hosts the online Conscious Bridge radio show, and publishes the popular website, Conscious Bridge. Please welcome Reverend Mark Gilbert.
Yay!
It's kind of interesting. First off, thank you for the bio. I'm always sitting there, because I show up sometimes at places and they read a bio from like years ago. And that one was very current, and very brief too. I had them go on and on and on. I'm like, cut it. Who wrote that? Well, it's great to be back with you. I was pleased when Reverend Jyoti contacted me and asked me to come back, and she said, okay, our message title for today is A New Light of Service, but you don't have to use that if you don't want to. And I always like to use the titles that are already set in place, because those titles are often for me. They're an opportunity for me to go in with that message, that aspect of whatever it is Spirit wants me to learn through the preparation of the talk. And so today is for me. And I hope that you benefit from it too, but I already know that I'm going to benefit from it. So it's a success in my mind, 100%. A new light of service. Now, there's 2 things I'm going to talk about today. Lee emailed me earlier this week and asked me what the talk was really going to be about. And I said, well, it's obviously, in my mind, it's going to be about light, and it's going to be about service. You know, those are the 2 key words in there. And so what we're going to be looking at for the next few minutes is light from a metaphysical standpoint, and then we're rolling that into how it relates to service and stepping up on the planet in service. I couldn't help but notice as I'm looking around the room and thinking about things this morning, you know, first off, above our Science of Mind teaching symbol, we have all these words. You'll notice one of them is light, and that light is, and all of these words are actually an aspect of the divine. We talk about God qualities in our classes, or what is it that is embedded in the essence of that oneness, and we have, you know, a hard time of wrapping our words around those aspects, because they embody such, there's a vastness to it, yet a personableness to it. And so from within that standpoint of the divine or God, one of the qualities we often reference is light. We have a candle burning over here too as a reminder of light. When we saw the vision statement that we all read a couple of times, it mentioned light and love within it. There was the beautiful reading that Leah picked out for today that was from Eric Butterworth, and I love that because it certainly set the stage for a discussion about what do we mean by light. So let's look at that for just a minute, but I want to go back to my youth for a moment, because I've never told this story before, but I had this little funny thing that I did. This will let you know what a weird kid I was. But I would, at times, have this habit. I didn't do it all the time, but enough that it stuck in my memory, that I would put my eyes, hands over my eyes, and all of a sudden see light. Or I would put my head down on a desk, you know, on my arm, and see light. Anybody else had this experience too? And you would move within. And now, of course, from a scientific standpoint, we could say, oh, you know, there's the receptors in the back of the eyeball, the pressure of the eyeballs being hit, and it's forcing the receptors to fire, and the brain is seeing it as light, just as it represents the reflected light that comes into our eye. And on some scientific material level, that's true. But what was also true for me was that as I did this, as I had that experience, I would stay with it. There was something that was drawn to me, to wanting to experience the light that I was seeing and sensing within my eyes when it passed upon it. And I would stay with it, and in my own mind, I would imagine going down the rabbit hole of experience. I don't know if anybody remembers the old Marvel comic books, Doctor Strange. Anybody heard of Doctor Strange? You can go look this up. I think they're actually coming out with a Doctor Strange movie, because Marvel comes out with everything, every character they've ever had. But Doctor Strange in the original comic books, when he would go into this other world, it was total darkness, yet there were these pathways he would be walking on and doing magic spells and such. And so there was always, in the essence of that, this sense of mystery yet a path. Darkness, yet light. And in my mind's eye, whenever I would have the little experience of pressing against my eyes, I sensed that same sort of pathway in light. There was something that drew me to the light. Now, I didn't know what it was at the time, but later on, as I became more and more a student of metaphysics and spirituality, I recognized that what I was doing and being drawn to was the essence of that God quality of light that is within each and every one of us. That we all have that light in us, and that we are drawn to that light, like moths to the flame. We feel like there is something divine about it, that we're called to it. And what that experience that I did was, I represent it now as something called one glimpse. The truth is, we walk around in this material universe, knocking around with sensory experiences and our life patterns and stories, and we would like to say that my life is about this. Here's where I was born. Here are these human experiences I had, and here's where I am right now. And this is my life, you know. And then all of this stuff is bombarding me, is grabbing my attention. And on some level, that's true, but we know there's that deeper level of the whole spirit and light that's underneath it. And occasionally, we get those glimpses of the other aspect of light. Now, that's why we practice in our teachings here in our classes. We call us to a path of meditation or spiritual practices that allow us to have some experiences of the divine, experiences where we tap into that light and that God energy. Because so much of our life is bombardment with external stuff. Politics and Clinton and Trump and the world and negativity and all of that stuff that is going on out there in the media. We're bombarding us with stream this, watch that, listen to this. And we're so overwhelmed that sometimes we need to balance the bombardment of sensory experience with a taste, a glimpse into the oneness that's our really truth. Leah mentioned in the bio that I've been doing a radio show. It was about a year ago, and it was one of those beautiful coincidences where I got offered the opportunity to do this. It's an online podcast. I pre-recorded the thing. I started out by reaching out to people that I knew and saying, would you like to be on a podcast radio show, you know? And it became fun, but after a few months of that, and the program started getting aired, it's aired by the Coffee Party, which is a transpartisan political group. Therefore, here's where you're going to respond back, good luck with that. But their mission is to bring civility and reason to the political process. Good luck with that. All right? But part of their aspect, and there's a couple of ministers, now I'm in part of the leadership of the group, and there's a couple of ministers who are on the group now, but they asked me to do these radio shows. And so after I've sort of like started reaching out to my friends, all of a sudden the programs were getting aired. I was having people contact me and say, hey, I'm coming out with this book, or I'd love to be on your show. And so now I'm at the luxury of being able to pick and choose who gets on the show and not. And so it's actually fairly beneficial. But I had a guy contact me a couple of months ago, and he sent me a copy of his book. And he is an author that was recently published by Sounds True, right down the street from you. Sounds True. You know, it's a worldwide organization, well known, but you guys are literally just a couple of miles from them. But anyway, he had a book called Shift into Freedom. And his name is Locke Kelly, L-O-C-H, Kelly. I had not heard of him before, but he sent me a copy of his book, and I loved it. I loved it. In fact, he sent it to me electronically, and I said, I got to get this in paperback because I'm going to be marking it up and referencing it. And at the end of every chapter was what he called one glimpse. One glimpse. And he recognized that aspect of what I was talking about, that we feel like we're in this material existence and tend to forget about and need continuous ways of building the spiritual muscle of reminders of the light that is within us. And so I'm going to give you one of Locke Kelly's glimpses, because I think, and I would encourage you to get the book, and at the end of every chapter are more and more of these little short meditations and glimpses that are calling us to experience that light. So if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes for a moment. And in your mind's eye, I want you to answer the question, what is here now if there is no problem to solve? What is here now if there is no problem to solve? Who is here? What is aware? What is here when there is nowhere to go and nothing to do? Nothing to know or create or become? What is here just now when you're not the problem solver? Just feel into whatever shows up. Who or what is aware? What is here when there is no referencing the past? No going one moment into the future? When you're not settling into sleep and not going up into thought? What's here now? What's it like when there's no problem to solve? What do you notice? What is absent? What is here now if there is no problem to solve? So come back into the room. Now, this was an interesting one for me. This is the one that grabbed me. I thought, wow. Because I tend to be a problem solver. It's like I've got my to-do list and I get up and I'm crossing things off. And, meditate. Got it. Spiritual practice has become one more to-do thing in the church world. But if you sit back and think, what is the essence that's within you if there's nothing to be done? Nothing that needs to be solved, no problems to be handled. That feeling, it can go by many names. Witness consciousness is the one I like because it gets that witness aspect of life. But what we're doing when we touch into these glimpses, either the experience of the light when pressing against my eyes, or contemplating who am I when there's nothing to solve, is a glimpse, a reminder that life is more than this plane of existence. That embedded within each of us are these God qualities, these and so many more, that are begging to be birthed in our life. And then the question becomes, how are we going to birth those? How are we going to birth those? Ernest Holmes, and for those of you who are new, Ernest Holmes is the founder of the philosophy of science and mind. That's his picture back there on the back wall. But Ernest Holmes wrote a lot about the concept of light. The concept of light. I'll give you just a few quotes from Ernest. Ernest, by the way, was a mystic and philosopher from the early part of the 20th century who studied science, philosophy, and religion, sought the common threads from those and put them into book form, created a philosophy that's been grown and evolved through time into the centers of spiritual living. But Ernest, in his books, wrote about light as this way. He said, in moments of deepest realization, the great mystics have sensed that one life flows through all, and that all are some part of that life. They have also seen substance, a fine, white, brilliant stuff, forever falling into everything, a substance indestructible and eternal. At times, the realization has been so complete, they've actually been blinded by the light. Light was the first great revelation of divine creative energy that called all things into being. Let there be light, and there was light, just as Eric wrote about in the quote that we have read. Let there be light. So from the very beginning of our very essence, we recognize the special power of light. It's not just this reflective thing, but something spiritual. Ernest also wrote, there is a light that permeates the world, but we have not sensed it. We need, in the silence of our own contemplation, to take time to feel the light and to see it. Take time to feel it and to see it. Each of us should seek the beam of light within and follow it to the great light, the light that is in everything. And one more. There has to be in everyone a light. There has to be in everyone a divinity that shapes his ends, rough hoe them though they may be, He has to be behind everyone. There has to be behind everyone an urge and a push, and in front a pull that is irresistible, immutable, and absolute. Ernest wrote about the concept that I frequently mention in my talks, and it's called, he references and calls it the divine urge. It's that something that bubbles up within us that says that I'm here to express some unique talent, some ability, some gift, some aspect of myself that is really my essence of being and why I'm on this planet at this time. And that urge that calls forth to be expressed in our life, he references as the divine urge. There's some key points I want to take away from those Ernest quotes, just to make sure they're very, very clear in you this morning. One of them is that he says, and now I'm giving you my summary, there is an indestructible and eternal substance that's falling and flowing in everything. Okay, so we really are talking about a substance that's driving and flowing in the universe. You've ever seen those beautiful pictures of the artist Alex Gray, who draws those things that look like chakra light flowing through bodies and such. I love that interpretation. But so many mystics and people have had those divine revelations, that flow of light. Second point is that mystics have realized this in their greatest moments of realization. What's a mystic? We're all a mystic in our own way. A mystic is someone who touches and tastes the divine. We tend to say a mystic is like a Mother Teresa or somebody who has, has some deep experience that's unattainable to me, but we really all are mystics, and we go into our own spiritual practices and have those glimpses, as we did a moment ago, wondering who is it that is here when there's no problem to solve. That's a mystical experience when we can step outside of this mind and physical life and touch the greater. The third point is we can experience it in meditation and contemplation. I just said that. The fourth one is our experience of the light connects us to the greater light in all. Because when we start sensing this light and the oneness of which we talk and teach here, what we're recognizing is that even though I'm on this spiritual path and I'm trying to deepen in my wisdom and understanding of the divine, that when I really recognize that, wait a minute, I'm connected to you and to you and to you and to you, and that this light that's flowing through us has us all as one, and so that the message I give here for me is really the message for you. And the work that I'm doing for me is really work for you. Then all of a sudden it reorients my purpose. My purpose in life becomes less about selfish actions and becomes more about selfless actions. And the final point of Ernest is this light is creative energy that expresses as our personal urge to create. What happens, though, is sometimes we get off track. That we tend to start thinking that, well, my life, who am I to be the person that can do whatever I think I'm called to do? I'm called to draw and be an artist. How am I going to make money with that? And I've got to make a living. If I'm going to be called to be a spiritual teacher or a minister or whatever your role is, how am I going to do that? I mean, this other path that seems to be paying off so much better. Or my life training and education was in these topics. Or who am I? I'm not worthy. I'm just this person who went through this little path and these experiences and these parents who told me I couldn't do X, Y, and Z, and now I'm trying to just deal with life. How am I supposed to step beyond the limitations and challenges that I've got to move into actually claiming my greatness and goodness and what I'm here for? But I'm here to tell you and remind you that you got to push through that. The classes here, like self-mastery and the others, are designed to reorient your life, to change how you think about the events that have transpired and the beliefs that you hold, so you can move into the greater expression of who you are. And that's really what you're here for. I've had my own experience of this. I had, many years ago, and I think I mentioned this one time when I was here, I had a fairly high-level job with the government. I was a regional administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. That's a real mouthful of a title. But I was meeting with senators and congressmen and governors, and I had a staff of 120-something people and traveled 10 states in the corner office and blah, 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 blah. It had a good bully pulpit in terms of health care. But at a certain point, though, I was coming through the spiritual training of practitioner and then minister, And I became a minister while I was in that role. And I really tried to meld my spirituality into it, and to a degree I could. Sort of like an orchestrator, trying to, I'll put a little spirituality here, a little spirituality there. But at a certain point, though, within me, something in me intuitively said, I've got to let go of this role. As much as all the external trappings of it are, I knew in my heart of hearts that I had to step away from a fairly high-paying and high-profile position to really follow my heart's guidance, that what I'm about is truly being of service, of understanding complexity and explaining it simply. That's something I've learned over time. And speaking and writing, and more on spiritual topics than on healthcare topics. It took time, but I eventually released that job and went into the ministry full time. At that time, I was serving as a minister at New Dawn down in Aurora. And at a certain point, though, even that needed to change. I led to a role in home office, and et cetera, and I felt like, and this is the key message I wanted you to take out of this little story, is that although I listened to myself and let go of something that seemed from an external standpoint stupid, who are idiot, to let go of this. Everybody wants that. But I had to let go of it to claim the next thing that my heart soul was calling me to. It's the next level of service. But the point is not only the letting go of that. That's not a static acceptance. You don't jump to that and say, okay, I'm a minister now. And that's the end of the story. Because it continues to evolve. It continues to change. Even to the point where I now have moved through a number of years in the ministry. And I remember several years ago, and again, this is when I was working and now at home office for CSL full-time. I think I was doing my blog site and some other things. And I had written one book, and I said, what's next? Something in my heart said I was called to a different level of service. And so I did something I'd never done before. I went away on a personal retreat and took 5 days up on the banks of Lake Superior in the state of Minnesota. And this person had a one-room cabin they rented out for personal retreats that were right on the lake. And I stayed there for 5 days, meditating and contemplating, and I got a lot of internal guidance that said, here's what's next for me. And it led me to the next steps. And those have grown. And that was maybe 3 years ago. But then this year, more comes along. And I've left that role. Part of what came out of that was to let go of that home office role I was serving in, and to focus more on global growth of our centers of spiritual living. It led to me being the first ever person in home office to focus on that particular workload. So what a blessing to be able to let go of something that was good to move to something that was greater. And at each time, when did I lose? By stepping from an external material standpoint, I can say, oh yes, the salary went down, or this left. Yes, that left, but this gained over here. My heart was singing over here. I felt higher levels of service to God and Spirit and to the light when I came over here and did this. And so, in letting go of that job and creating this one, again, that's not the end. That's not the end. And I hope that you're relating this to your own life. Because it's not about my life, it's about our life and our individual expressions as we walk around and express our calling in our own unique way. So where I stand before you today is an interesting character in my mind. I'm working part-time as a global services coordinator. I'm doing these online radio shows. I'm writing a blog site, blah, blah, blah. I'm out talking. But within me is this, what's next? Something in my heart and something in the light in me says, you're not truly living what you need to be doing. So I stand before you today saying, I'm at the moment of flux. And it's okay. It's scary. It shows up in different ways. there's a person who wrote a book a number of years ago on finding, by the way, my first book was called Be Yourself, and the last third of the book was all about practices on identifying your calling. This is how much it's been an issue on my mind. But one of the big impacts on my life in terms of looking at teachings and classes on looking at your life purpose was a guy by the name of Greg LaVoy. And Greg wrote a book called Callings a number of years ago, and he does a great class which he teaches on that. And I'm looking for mine. Here it is. He wrote in his book, Callings, the body, this thing here, the body is not an obstacle to soul, as so many spiritual pilgrims would have it. It's not a mere skin to share it on the way to some incredible lightness of being. It is rather a channel to it, and the body's sufferings are the midwife of the very great things, as the Swiss physician and alchemist Philippus Paracelsus once said. Decay, as he put it, is the beginning of all birth, the beginning of the great work, that of spiritual transformation. The message is that when we have things show up in our bodies, whether it's physical ailments or it's emotional turmoil, those are clues to us that we might not be in alignment with our path. And that's what Lavoie is talking to there, to listen to your body. Many of us know that Louise Hay was a Science of Mind minister. Louise Hay, we know her from her famous book, You Can Heal Your Life. For those of you not familiar with the book, it basically, the bulk of it is a series of illnesses and ailments in the body, and you look up your ailment, and then it tells you what the metaphysical underlying purpose or reason for that ailment is. Well, so naturally, when my wife and I every time have some sort of ongoing ailment, we'll pull out Louise Hay and see what she has to say and what is the message for us. And so lately, and this has been for about 4 to 5 weeks now, including some doctor visits, I've been having a problem with my left knee. And it's caused me to limp and to walk around funny and to be in pain after doing yard work and blah, blah, blah. So what does Louise Hay say knees are? Well, part of it is inflexibility. It's attachment to your ego. No, not me. I'm not attached to my ego. It's not, and again I said it, but not being flexible. In other words, wanting something to look like something a certain way and holding on to it so dearly that I'm not open to the newness that might flow into my life if I would release control. That nasty control that keeps coming back. So, what I'm having to look at is that the knee is a reminder, just as the intuitive messages are, that it's time for me to up-level my levels of service into something higher. What's that going to be? I don't know. I'm sitting in the mystery, just like many of you probably are too. But I know that my life is giving me the clues. My life's saying, hey, let go of control. Let go of how you thought your success was going to look in the external world. Be open to spirit. And when you do that, you will look and recognize that the letting go opens you to higher levels of your own path and your own service and your own exploration of what it means to be a spiritual being on this planet. I know that I'm in that mystery, and I invite you to be with it yourself. See what's next for you, and know that ultimately it's all about maintaining that connection to spirit, light, sensing it at the deepest levels, building that into our life, and the more that we sense light and know that we're one, the more we're called to be in service and answer our calling. Let's go in prayer this moment. We simply know there is only one life, one God, one power, one divine soul that moves in and through everyone and every person on this planet. And as we anchor ourselves into the oneness of the divine, We simply know that the flow of energy that is in everyone, that light of being that is in all of the universe, is in me, it is in you, it is in everyone. And so I know that as we go forth this day, we stay in tune with that light, with the infinite Spirit of God. By whatever name you wish to call it, you simply stay anchored in the awareness of the one. And as you do so, you step out of the lack and limitations and fears and doubts of your material life and just let go of that which is no longer serving you. And you step to the higher levels on your path and claim your greatness. You listen to your intuitive knowing. You listen to your body. And you allow all those messages to guide you gently, ever gently, on that higher step on your path to greatness, goodness, and serving the one from which we all came. So I know our lives are good, perfect, whole, and complete. And I know that as we go forth this day, we do so with a sense of love and joy and peace and harmony and light. That light guides our lives. Light guides all of our affairs. And that we are light and love.